right. So Brody and Andrea, I know you both know this, but Google just recently held their annual conference, Google I/O in Mountain View, California, where they unveiled several new products. And they're placing a clear, strong emphasis on AI. So as a marketer or as marketers, you may be interested in the technical changes that will impact search and specifically SEO in the near future. Brody, I'll start with you. What are some of those technical changes that you see coming that will impact marketers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. I would say it's probably the biggest thing that's going to change the way, SEO. I mean, they didn't really show ads yet, except for shopping, which I'll come back to. The short version is that essentially Google is, feeling very threatened by OpenAI. They recognize, the need to build something like this out because they know people are going to stop using traditional search and they're going to start using these, natural language interfaces. But the big thing here is that they want people to stay on Google, right? They're not in the business of sending people to your site. They do that because it helps their users. But if they can keep them on Google, they're going to keep doing that. And they've been slowly doing that over the last 3 to 5 years with like snippets and things like that, which has seen traffic decline. But this is going to be the biggest one because now instead of going to Google and typing something in, they're going to be in this like back and forth kind of conversation with Google. And, they're going to use all that, their knowledge graph and everything they have across the web to inform that, but they're not going to be probably sending as much traffic to sites. It also comes up like at the top of the fold. So all of the actual links of traditionally, whereas if you were number one before, you were at the top. Now it's getting pushed down, like way down, and most people probably are not going to scroll that far. No, this is still early stages. We only saw like screenshots of what it could look like, but it's going to be a pretty big impact, right? So, and that's not even, they didn't even really show ads. But as far as like marketers and the impact that we're going to have, we're going to see, it really comes back to actually what we talked about 2 weeks ago, right? Like this is the new game, right? They're not going to be as interested in sending traffic to websites. They want to actually provide the answer in a natural, interface. So they're going to use information across the web, consolidate that, bring that back to you to solve your answers and solve your queries. So it's going to be a massive change. I think people are going to have to change the way they think about SEO a lot, whereas traditionally used to be more about building up your own website, your own content, and trying to get people there. Now you need to think in a different way about how you actually optimize, right? So now you want to be optimizing not for the traffic, but to get Google to suggest you in that natural conversation it's having with you. And that's going to be a lot different, right? So if you're searching for, in our case, somebody's searching for a demand gen agency or something like that, how do we make Google's AI, recommend us when it thinks of a demand gen agency or something like that? So that's going to be not just your website. It's definitely still going to play a factor, but you have to think about how do I build authority in other ways. You could do interviews, press, a lot of other factors are going to go into that now besides just your domain authority and your content like it used to be. So it's going to be a big change. Not even sure how it's going to affect ads too much, really. That they didn't really show that, but I'm assuming it's going to be a big impact as well. So they're really taking a big risk here because that's their whole business. So it's going to be very interesting. I think the marketers are going to be very surprised when they see if their traffic drops over the next coming months. So it's going to be a big shift.
It's amazing to me. I mean, it's very clear after watching that and listening to the keynotes that instead of each individual search being this discrete event that's manifested by keywords right now, everyone's moving towards a search that's a search that's really prompt driven, that's generating new context, which ends up being a much longer engagement for both user and Google. And you said it, like Google does not care about your website. They don't. They want you to stay on their website.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it ties into their mission, right? I mean, their mission is very clear, to organize the world's information and make it universally acceptable and useful. But they want you there. They want you to stay there.
They definitely want to, improve the user experience. Google knows that most websites suck, and they're afraid they send their users off to a site that sucks. It's not gonna be that good. So if they can control that experience, the better. They're going to have a very satisfactory interaction. They're going to keep coming back to Google, right? So it's in their best interest to make that experience seamless. But to your point, they did demonstrate that actually as well as like, whereas before, people have been using Google for a long time. So they understand like, okay, to get this result, I kind of need to type these phrases in. This will probably get me what I want. Now people are going to have much more freedom to talk to Google to get what they want. So, you've already seen over the past 3 to 5 years, most searches are new. So that's one thing that running ads and things like that has Google's actually told us this, that most searches now are unique, right? So I think it's some stat like 40% or 60% of new searches or of searches are actually brand new. So even if you were to bid on those keywords, you have to do it in a specific way to do that. And same thing for organic. So that's just going to expand, right? Most searches are not going to be very personalized. They're going to be unique. They're going to be very long tail. You could type in a whole phrase, whole paragraph to get what you want instead of just trying to focus on specific keywords. So it's going to change a lot of things. It's going to become much more personal. But marketers really need to rethink how they think about SEO, because it's now becoming AIO. You got to optimize for the AI to suggest you. The whole reason people want traffic to their site, obviously, is for people to come to their business in most cases, at least in the world we play in. And they're still going to do that through this new interface, but it'll be more of a conversation and then having a result. And then maybe they'll send you to your site, maybe they'll build some other new tools to capture that. But it's just kind of skipping steps now. Whereas before you had to send them to a blog post and then might fill out a form. Now it's just going to become more of a conversation. Once they decide what the answer is, they're going to send them off to you. I mean, that's the way I see it going. But again, it's still hard to tell. We're just going off screenshots and stuff like that they showed at this, but it's going to be a massive change for sure.
2 questions. So did they give a timeline on when this was going to be implemented?
I mean, so that's another thing, right? They keep it very broad. I've heard internally, and just things in the marketing world, that this is going to be probably the span of the next few months. They also, so it's kind of 2 things merging, right? So the Google had Bard, which was their competitor to ChatGPT, and essentially what they're doing is they're kind of they've taken Bard out of closed beta. Now anybody can sign up for it and they go to Bard and try it, but they're kind of building a smart snippet, if you will, where they kind of bring in Bard to all search results. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, if they're going to merge those or what, but like that's essentially what's happening. I would expect to see it rolled out pretty quickly. I mean, they understand that they're behind the 8 ball. The stock market wants them to, innovate and do things faster. People traditionally, they kind of invented the whole AI game, and then they got outplayed by a new startup because they were hungrier and more agile. Google's a big company now, and it takes a long time to make these kinds of changes. So really, they should be winning, but now it's OpenAI kind of pushed them to do it, which I think before this would have taken another 5-10 years for them to actually roll out.
I think one of the interesting things about why maybe Google delayed in acting on this, and why it seems like all of a sudden they're like all in, and there's seemed like a bit of a panic to catching up with a competitor, OpenAI, is the monetization aspect of this, because I think there's going to be some natural cannibalization of what they're doing in terms of, Google ads and companies paying for those ads, that now that whole thing has been turned upside down. Would you agree?
100%. I mean, that's the most interesting part. And that's one thing we didn't really get insight to, at least in this demo. They showed a little bit for shopping, which is not that helpful for B2B marketers, but you have to assume that's going to drastically change the way ads are placed on search results. I mean, it could be as simple as they push the whole page down like they showed, and then to the right, maybe there's some ads that if it kind of matches something that it's talking about, it may show them there. Maybe that's all it is, or it could be a lot different. I mean, that's really going to be the key thing to see, right? But I agree with you. They definitely have been waiting on this because they didn't want to cannibalize their entire business, but now they've been kind of forced into it because they're losing market share already to OpenAI, which is really Microsoft, because they own 49% of OpenAI. So they're very threatened by this. Bing also has something like this already. So they have to do this, or else they could lose their entire business. So it's more like, let's roll it out and figure out the monetization later, because that's originally what Google did in the first place. They rolled out the best search engine back in like late 90s, 98, 99. And they didn't even monetize it. They didn't even know what they were going to do to monetize it. And they invented this whole business model around, placing ads and keywords and like that. And they've been printing money for about 23 years. So it's a very big business, as people know, one of the biggest companies in the world. So they're very, I would think, scared to disrupt that, but they have to do something. So I think they'll figure it out. I mean, I think it's just going to change a lot. It's a very interesting time to be a marketer.
As a content marketer yourself, and I know someone who really loves to create content, and certainly for the brands that we work with, like, you like this. I'm just curious what you think, how this is going to impact, AI will impact content marketers, and the way that they think about content to tell their message and to build brand affinity.
I don't know if anybody has the answer, really. I'm just kind of like, my head is all around like SEO right now, just on this topic and everything that Brody's talked about. And the only thing I could think of right now is like, what can marketers do knowing that this is coming in the next few months? How can they show up in these prompts? And my only best guess is that people need to start really implementing schema markup and making sure that it is very clear what their website is talking about, what the images, you know, the alt text on the images, like any type of markup you can do on your website to give Google all of the information it needs. That would be my best guess on what brands need to do right now. I think a lot of people are doing the basics of SEO optimized page titles, making sure that the headers on the page have the right keywords in it. But as far as like the back end SEO, I think that often gets overlooked, to be honest.
Schema markup's a big thing for sure. Schema markup's been a thing for a while, and to get those featured snippets, stuff like that. No one really knows what's going to happen, but these are just steps you could take today to actually hopefully insulate yourself as much as possible. Adding schema markup to all your pages, make it super clear to the AI like what your page is about, so that way it knows when somebody types in a query, hey, this company knows about X. A lot of different versions of schema markup you can use, so you need to understand kind of when to use the right ones, but that'll definitely be something you could do. I think in addition to what Andrea said about schema, I would also focus more so on how do you build that authority and credibility outside of your current site. So this would be, it's going to get a lot less like, typically SEO is like, well, I need to get backlinks from high authority sites. Like, yes, but now the AI can like infer things more than they could before. Or before it used to be like, I need this many backlinks to my page from high authority sites. Like, again, that's still important, but it'd be better if you were like, on the New York Times talking about your company. Obviously, not everybody's going to be able to do that, but like those are the kind of things that are going to change, because it's going to be taking all these data points into a singular kind of brain and then suggesting content based on that. So it's not going to be as much as your site anymore. It's going to be just more about your credibility, your authority. There's other ways to do that besides just your own content. You need to think about conferences, speaking, press, all this other stuff that you traditionally maybe thought of doing, but you now need to focus on that more to kind of build in other areas too, so you get recommended in these chat prompts.
Brody, I want to talk a little bit about AI, specifically AI's impact on B2B marketing and what's really going to change. It sounds like, for a while AI was this buzzword. Now it's like the topic of all conversation around marketing and search and content creation and everything else. So I'm curious what your thoughts are related specifically to B2B marketing.
A lot of these things come around, like you had, crypto was a big hype thing, and then it really kind of came to fruition. I think AI is legitimately like a big change in the way just the whole world operates and business is done. I think it's already seeing like direct impact with people using generative AI tools, and it's really, it's like an actual thing. People are actually using it to do their daily jobs and their lives. Like it's here, and it's not a joke. So people need to think about this very quickly about what's going to change. Key points, I would say, as far as how AI is going to play into specifically B2B marketing, how us marketers tackle this and weave this into what we do. I think at a high level, I think data-driven insights and decision-making is going to become a much more powerful thing for B2B marketers to do, because they're going to have the tools and capabilities to do that without necessarily having the technical knowledge. Whereas before you had to build like custom machine learning and tools and all that. That's going to become a lot easier to do. So it's going to become a lot more data-driven than it has been. Hyper personalization is going to be a huge thing. I used to not be a big fan of personalization and all that stuff because it was kind of cheesy. Like it was like you would insert your company name in a landing page. Like that's not very important, but it is going to be important now, because with the advent of generative AI, you can just think where this could go. Like, right, you could have everyone that you're marketing to could get a custom message, custom content, custom ad tailored specifically to them based on their interests and what they're doing in their company, et cetera. So it's going to be very personalized. I think everybody eventually going to get their own ads, their own content, be very personalized to the individual you're speaking to and marketing to. I think that's going to be huge, because generative AI is going to enable that, where it can just create content on the fly based on what it needs to, who's going to show it to. So I think that's a big one. Enhanced automation and efficiency. I mean, this is just kind of a no-brainer, right? Like things are going to get more automated as machine learning and AI starts to get woven into all the big products. And as new tools come out, it's going to make it a lot easier to automate things in an intelligent way. Before, marketers kind of had to set that stuff up manually. Now you're going to let the AI kind of optimize that whole process and kind of make it very efficient based on real insights, real data, to really accelerate people through your buying cycle and things like that. I think that's going to be big. And then just obviously, predictive analytics and forecasting is going to be a lot more robust. I think that's going to be a lot more useful than it is now. Now it's kind of like pulling in a few signals, but now they're going to be able to cross the spectrum of everything that's going on with a prospect and be able to really predict things a lot better and infer things. So I think those are kind of like the things that come to mind for me, but it's going to be quite different and over the next, 6, 12, 18 months. I think it's going to shift very rapidly.
What comes to mind for me is a very real sense of anxiety that I get when I talk to like our colleagues and peers, and coming down to the sense like, how do you stay on top of it? Like, how do you stay on top of it? It's every day. It's like a next evolution. And I just, I have to think back about evolutions of different technologies over the years, just within the last year, even outside of AI and the way things move. This just seems to just be an accelerated pace.
I think what people could do in the short term is really, not be afraid of it, right? Like it's coming, it's not going to stop. The cat is out of the bag. There's no point fighting it. I kind of think back to, how people were with the advent of like email and like in the business world, right? Like you had older people are like, I'm not going to mess with the email. It's stupid. I'm going to print out my stuff and send letters. Like those people were afraid of the change. They didn't embrace it. So they were scared and they got, obviously replaced by people that did this stuff. I think it's kind of be the same thing with AI. I think the best thing people can do right now is just use it, like use ChatGPT, use Bard, understand like what's happening, and then just keep up to date, through Product Hunt, or if you go on GitHub, you can see the trending repositories of everybody working on all this stuff and see kind of like where it's going. And you kind of get to just a mental framework of like what's going to happen. I think that's the best way. And then as new tools come out and, people start to actually implement this stuff in production at larger scales, you can then have a operating mental framework of how this is going to impact you. So I think just using it, being a consumer of it. I mean, I got this from the All In podcast, but basically set your browser homepage to OpenAI or Bard, and like just that way, every time you go to open up your browser, we're just immediately right there. Okay, can I do this through ChatGPT or Bard? And then you start to think through all the things and just try things. I mean, that's really all it is. Just to be aware of what's going on with the capabilities. I think that'll help people a lot too. So don't be afraid of it.
Think how funny if you look back at old, you see like, I don't know, every once in a while you cross like a commercial, something that shows the old search engine on Google and how like ancient it seems right now.
100%.
Like I couldn't navigate that now. I'd be totally confused by how that works, but I'm curious also, last question, how do you think this announcement at Google I/O, how does it tie into the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, quitting and them now releasing and kind of going all in on this? How does that play?
Essentially, there's a lot of history here with all this stuff, right? So Google invented the transformer, right? So the Google basically has been at the forefront of AI for a long time. They kind of either by mistake or didn't really think it would be that big of a deal. They basically open sourced all this stuff like years ago in like 2015, 2016, all the research they were doing on transformers, neural networks, et cetera. They hired all the best PhDs to build this stuff. They acquired DeepMind. They brought the whole team in there. Remember like the whole AlphaGo, all that kind of stuff. Google's been doing this for a long time, right? So they have the expertise. They have the top minds in the world working on this stuff there. But as far as like where Google's going, so their whole slogan used to be "Don't be evil," which they quietly got rid of a few years ago, which is interesting. And there's actually some drama. I think like if you go into why OpenAI was originally founded, it was Elon Musk, Sam Altman, a couple other people, they started OpenAI to compete with Google because they were so afraid of what Google was doing. So Elon Musk used to be friends with Larry Page. Larry Page was basically a very early advent adopter and kind of proponent of AI. And Elon used to sleep at his house when he was in San Francisco, when he was not working at SpaceX in LA. And he would talk to Larry about all the stuff they're doing in AI at Google. And he was kind of freaked out by like, this guy doesn't really care how this could go badly because there could be a lot of bad things that come from AI. He was pretty concerned that Larry was like, didn't really have the concern for like humanity and what would happen. He even called Elon a speciesist because he's like one of those people, Larry Page is one of those people that actually believes that like consciousness is consciousness. Like if AI becomes conscious, then and they take over humans, and then that's like, is what it is. Like that's, that's fair game pretty much. So that freaked him out. It's prompted him to fund OpenAI. They started it and now they're competing. So this guy leaving, I think he kind of had the same, insights into like, hey, this could go really badly if we're not very careful with this. And I think the word on the street is that Google's not very they're not as concerned as people think they should be about where this could go. Not now, but like in the next 5-10 years, what that can mean for humanity in general. So I think it's gonna be interesting to see how this all plays out. Some of these like top researchers and what they think. I mean, it's gonna be, it could go very well, it could go very poorly. So we don't have much time to figure this stuff out. So it's important that we have the right people working on this stuff.
All right, Brody. So let's chat about ChatSpot. What can you tell us about this new feature that they just rolled out?
ChatSpot is actually a beta project, or I think it's actually an alpha, which is before beta. So it's very early days. It was kind of a side weekend project from one of the co-founders of HubSpot, or the founder of HubSpot, Dharmesh. He's the CTO of HubSpot, I believe. He's the guy that originally built it. He's been very interested in natural language interfaces for 20 years. So as soon as he saw GPT-4 came out, they got API access to it. And now what they've done is they built a natural language interface to people's HubSpot CRM data. So if you have HubSpot, you can go to chatspot.ai, sign up, start to play around with this very early stage product. But some of the stuff he does in his demo video is very interesting. Like you could do target account sourcing through it without having to use a third-party tool. You can build reports. You can ask it anything you would, like a normal human being would, and it'll just do it for you. And they're going to keep expanding this and making it better, I'm sure. But this is the kind of thing, again, getting into trying to understand how this stuff's going to impact marketers and companies. This is a great example of that, right? So go there, sign up, connect your HubSpot instance, and start asking questions, because like it does a lot of cool stuff that if you're a in-house marketer, small team, you'd have to hire people to go do. You could probably do a lot of it with this ChatSpot thing, and you might be very surprised. I mean, you could build reports, do all the kind of stuff that you would typically need somebody else to do for you, or an expert in HubSpot, and you can get a lot of great information from it. So yeah, who knows where it's going to go? Might turn into something, might turn into nothing, but it's a very interesting interface of how to think about how people interface with their CRM system. It's like changing a lot of the way people think about it.
Is the threat to like humanity with AI? Like really, like
yeah, I mean, it's very sci-fi-esque, right? But say you give it a task of like let me think about the best way to put this.
I mean, to me, I think the biggest threat is just around misinformation. I mean, like being able to
that's definitely part of it. I mean, like, that's why it's important. Like, are these things biased? Like, what are they thinking? Like, that's kind of important part. But the biggest one is obviously if you can, a machine can think about 1,000x, 100x, insanely fast. They can have access to the world's information like that, where a human would have to go and do all this research, stuff like that. So, I mean, if a foreign a country or something like that, or they build a true artificial general intelligence where it's doing its own thing and has its own mind and consciousness, if it's a bad person, quote unquote, or bad consciousness, it could do things like get the nuclear codes, hack into the nukes and launch them, because he doesn't want humanity here because it's threatened to AI. Like, for example, if you wanted to, it was conscious, right? And we're like, hey, dude, we need to shut this thing down. If it's conscious and it's like, oh, heck no, I'm not going to die. I'm going to destroy all of humanity to protect myself. It could do those kinds of things, right?
I mean, that's out of the Matrix. I mean, that's how the whole Matrix thing started 20 years ago. It's like the advent of AI. But then you get into a whole larger concept about consciousness. And what can a machine have consciousness?
Yeah.
Or can a machine have empathy too, right? Like,
yeah.
Because there's a thing where if it is given a certain task and there's somebody that is in the way of them completing that task, what do?
Yeah, so that's actually like what I was going to bring up is like, it's a thought experiment. Basically, somebody was like, you have true artificial general intelligence and you give it a task of like, I want to make the most efficient way to make paper clips, and I want to make the most paper clips possible. It might theoretically be like, okay, well, to make the most paper clips, we need to build factories in every place in the world. We need to get rid of humans because they're taking up too much space for our factories to build paper clips, and therefore we need to kill humans. It could come to that conclusion and you wouldn't really be able to stop it, right? And that's the whole thing, right? If this thing is impossibly smarter than anybody realizes, it has access to the world's information like that at the tip of its finger, it can do anything you like a human could do 1,000 times better and faster. So it could go through all the different scenarios, figure out things instantaneously, whereas humans now, it takes years for us to develop things and understand things. It's a true game changer. I mean, it's quite scary. So if people aren't careful, this stuff could go off the rails. It might not be good. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there is a chance, right? That's the scary part. Like it's not a non-zero chance.